When you go to CERN, right outside the front door is this gigantic picture of this Indian god that is standing inside of a portal, walking through. There was a tour to let people come in and look around, and as one person was looking around, they saw these gigantic clear panels. They don't know what material they were made out of, and I have a picture of them leaning up against the side of a part of the machine with these hieroglyphs on them. Nobody can decipher these hieroglyphs. Nobody knows what in the world these are, what they mean, where they came from, who wrote them, what writing, what ancient culture are they linked to. Nobody knows. NASA recently discovered something called X-points around Earth and also around the sun. These are naturally occurring portals that open and close every single day. They create microscopic black holes. Now,
really?
Yeah. So originally, a lot of people were getting scared about this. Only the elite of the elite had access to these portals to travel all around the world.
Billy Carson, the founder of Forbidden Knowledge, says that CERN keeps this information hidden, and for likely reasons. But going beyond secrets and hidden truths, there is the exciting possibility of finally uncovering knowledge of portal travel from the texts of ancient Egyptians and Sumerians. And according to Billy Carson, CERN is already experimenting with creating and studying portals, all using existing portal points. The Sumerians write about something called the Der Key, which translates to the bond of heaven and earth. In his book, The 12th Planet, Zachariah Sitchin writes, "From the earliest days, man knew that his creators had come from the heavens. Anunnaki he called them, those who from heaven to earth came. Their true abode was in the heavens. Man always knew, Father who art in heaven, man knew to say. But those of the Anunnaki who had come and stayed on earth, man also knew, could be worshipped in the temples." The Anunnaki were gods from ancient Mesopotamian culture, which includes Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian texts. The tablets these were written on hold incredible power and knowledge, and they talk about cosmic order, divine conflicts, and the establishment of the king Anzu, who was hoping to control these tablets and gain their powers.
And Enlil talks about walking from his home world directly to Earth and walking from Earth directly back to his home world, bypassing even getting in a spaceship.
Enlil is the ancient Mesopotamian god of the atmosphere and a member of the triad of gods with Anu and Enki. Carson claims here that Enlil, being a high-dimensional being, traveled to Earth and several other points in space purely through portals or wormholes. It's a big assumption to make, but not an impossible one. Similar phenomena can be seen in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians had something called a Jed pillar Ankh, which most believe was just a symbol of rebirth. While it did have those meanings, according to Billy Carson, it was also something much more advanced. A Jed pillar is traditionally the symbol of stability, representing the spine or backbone of the god Osiris. And the Ankh is the life force or the breath of life. Billy Carson says that in ancient texts, the Ankh and the Jed pillar are described as oscillators that could resonate with the owner's atomic frequency. Think of it like a high-tech key. This key allowed people to pass through portals, but only if their frequency matched. If someone without the right frequency tried to use the portal, they'd be stopped in their tracks, maybe even destroyed.
That was the code programmed into the actual Ankh. The actual portal that they would walk through to travel wherever they were going, it would only let you walk through it if your frequency was programmed into the portal. That was your key.
This system ensured that only the elite had the power to travel through these special portals to different places around the world, possibly in places that also had their own portals. In Tula, Mexico, there's another interesting spot linked to an ancient Atlantean who, according to Billy Carson, came from Africa. Now, Atlanteans aren't connected to the lost city of Atlantis. They are the four massive statues that stand on top of Pyramid B in Tula. They were called Atlanteans because of their resemblance to Atlas figures that were used as pillars in European architecture, and as you can guess, it was Europeans who gave them this name. But Carson suggests that one of these figures was an African noble or African god, and he would stand in front of what looks like a simple indentation in a wall, holding his Jed pillar Ankh. Then he would literally walk through the wall and reappear somewhere else in the world. He'd return occasionally using this mysterious portal, always with the Jed pillar Ankh in hand. But these portal visits weren't limited to Earth, and that's where we are introduced to X-points.
Now, NASA recently discovered something called X points around Earth and also around the sun. These are naturally occurring portals that open and close every single day all around the outside of our planet.
X points, or electron diffusion regions, are real-life portals discovered by NASA-funded researchers at the University of Iowa way back in 2012. Unlike the portals in science fiction, these are not just fantasy. They connect Earth's magnetic field with the Sun's magnetic field, creating a path from our planet to the Sun's atmosphere, 93 million miles away. According to Carson, they also connect Earth to other planets in our solar system. Plasma physicist Jack Scudder was the one to spot these X points, and observations from NASA's Themis spacecraft and Europe's cluster probes have shown that these magnetic portals open and close dozens of times each day, just like Carson mentioned. These portals are located tens of thousands of kilometers away from Earth, where the geomagnetic field meets the solar wind. Most X points are small and short-lived, but some are vast and last longer. Energetic particles flow through these openings, heating Earth's upper atmosphere, causing geomagnetic storms and creating bright solar auroras. In 2015, NASA planned a mission called the Magnetospheric Multiscale Mission, MMS, to study these portals. In this study, 4 spacecraft equipped with particle detectors and magnetic sensors were deployed to observe these X points in Earth's magnetosphere. And the results were pretty unexpected, at least to those who aren't aware of ancient science. The Magnetospheric Multiscale Mission provided detailed observations of magnetic reconnection by capturing high-resolution data on how charged particles and electromagnetic fields behave in these regions. One major discovery is how energy is transferred during magnetic reconnection. MMS observed complex electron movements in thin electrical current layers where reconnection happens, which shows how electrons gain energy and speed up the reconnection process. What does this mean? Well, when magnetic fields from Earth and the Sun collide and cross, they create what are known as magnetic diffusion points. When these points intersect with charged particles from the Sun, they open up natural portals, which means that portals can occur naturally in space without needing to be artificially created.
All we have to do now is learn how to harness that power, and we can travel through space, and we can go great distances without having to put ourselves in hibernation pods and things like that.
Pulling this off would require an incredible amount of power and an even greater amount of secrecy. Some theorists have shared their findings and thoughts on this kind of portal travel, while others prefer to hide their experiments for obvious reasons. The people who did share their thoughts were Einstein and Rosen, giving birth to the Einstein-Rosen bridge theory. You've likely heard that name before in relation to portal travel from sci-fi movies or superhero movies, and the way it works is quite simple. An Einstein-Rosen bridge, also known as a wormhole, is a theoretical shortcut in space and time. Imagine space like a piece of paper with 2 points on it. Normally you'd have to travel across the paper to get from one point to the other, which could take a long time. But if you fold the paper so that the 2 points touch, you can just poke a hole through and move instantly between them. In simple terms, a wormhole is like that hole. It connects 2 distant points in space, allowing you to travel between them much faster than you could by moving through normal space. This could manifest as a tunnel that cuts through under a street or through a mountain, so you don't have to take the long way around. And this is the kind of pathway Carson believes our ancestors took. But the problem isn't the creation of the wormhole, it's something else. Because Carson says wormholes are already being created.
But something else they discover in the process is that they create microscopic black holes.
The immediate fear is that what if a black hole on our planet starts absorbing our planet? And given what we know of black holes, it's an understandable fear. However, a black hole created by the Large Hadron Collider in CERN would only make highly unstable black holes that decay almost immediately, posing no threat to Earth. And the thing that is saving us, the rapid decay, is the problem.
The biggest problem that we have is not creating the wormhole now, because we can create them, but how do you keep it open? How do you make it stable for something to pass through?
Theoretically speaking, there is a way to keep a black hole open long enough to allow portal travel. You would need to violate certain energy conditions, like the null energy condition or NEC. NEC is a rule in physics that says energy has to behave in a certain way, specifically that it should always be positive. But to keep a black hole open, we need to break this rule a bit and use something called exotic matter, which has negative energy. Exotic matter is an unconventional kind of energy that acts opposite to normal matter, forcing the black hole to stay open and not collapse under its own mass. It's only theoretical, but if CERN did manage to create a mini black hole and hold it open, it would prove our universe has more than just the 4 dimensions, something our ancestors already knew, in fact.
That we're living in a universe based on 11 dimensions. They theorized based on the mathematics that without 11 dimensions, this universe would collapse.
And this is backed up by Michio Kaku, a well-respected physicist known for co-founding string field theory and continuing Einstein's research. The way it works is, imagine a huge 11-dimensional space with bubbles floating in it. Each bubble represents an entire universe, and we live on the surface of one of these bubbles, which is 3-dimensional. This bubble is always expanding, and that's what we call the Big Bang. But sometimes these bubbles can bump into each other or split apart, which could explain how different Big Bangs happen. In string theory, which is what Michio Kaku studies, these bubbles can have different dimensions, and each dimension has its own vibrational frequency. The highest dimension a universe can have is 11, because anything beyond that becomes unstable and always collapses back to 11 dimensions. But with this 11-dimensional space, there can be bubbles that are 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional, and so on. Physicists call these bubbles brains, which is short for membranes, and each type of bubble is known as a p-brane, where p represents the number of dimensions.
So a p-brane is a universe in different dimensions floating in a much larger arena, and this larger arena is the hyperspace that I talked about originally. Also remember that each bubble vibrates, and each bubble vibrating creates music. The music of these membranes is the subatomic particles.
And this concept brings us close to what Albert Einstein called the mind of God. To him, gods weren't beings that intervened with human activities, but rather an entity that reveals themselves through the natural laws of the cosmos, like gravity, electromagnetism, and the laws of thermodynamics. God wasn't a deity, but an underlying order and harmony of the cosmos. In this context, the mind of God would be the cosmic music resonating through the 11-dimensional space. But before we can fathom an 11th dimension, there is a lot to understand about what comes before.
So right now we're in the 3rd dimension. We only can control the 1st and the 2nd. All right, the 1st dimension is a line. The 2nd dimension is connected lines. And because we're in the 3rd dimension, we're like the God over the 2nd and the 1st. We can control and manipulate those dimensions from the outside.
According to Carson, if any people live in those lower dimensions, they would be amazed by what we can do. They wouldn't be able to see us as 3-dimensional beings. They would only see the effects we have on their world. It would seem like magic to them, watching us manipulate their environment in ways they couldn't understand. To give you an example,
the 2D creature is outside at the moment and is wearing a cap. If I were to pick it up and rotate it in the 3rd dimension, and then place it back, that might be enough of a clue that I've visited. No one in the 2nd dimension could have done this because it required a movement in the 3rd dimension, and no one in 2D will ever be able to rotate it back to normal. So the backwards cap might just be more valuable than any of the gems because it is evidence of a higher dimension.
It seems so simple, but that's the kind of power we would have over them. And just like they cannot perceive what is possible in the 3rd dimension, what being can achieve in the upper dimensions would seem like magic to us.
The 4th dimension used to be said it was time. It's not time. That's just a hypothesis that Einstein was trying to correlate time to the 3rd. The 4th dimension is a tesseract, a 4th dimensional hypercube.
As per Carson, someone in the 4th dimension would be able to see all of time and space occurring all at once. If you started your day today with a smoothie for breakfast, walked to work, then returned home and ate Chinese for dinner, a 4th dimensional being could watch your entire day, all of those events, side by side, running at the same time as if they are panels in a cosmic book. Time, space, and distance would lose all meaning. As we go higher, the lines and boundaries get blurred further and further. So according to string theory and M theory, the fifth dimension is an additional spatial dimension beyond the conventional three. This one is more compactified, meaning it is curled up to such a small scale that is barely observable. The sixth dimension actually allows for the existence of multiple universes. The seventh includes all possible universes, even with their different laws of physics. The eighth includes infinite possibilities of initial conditions, which means you can experience a broader range of possible realities. Once we get to the ninth dimension, things start to unify. The ninth dimension houses every possible law of physics, no matter what, giving us a sort of baseline to explore every single alternate universe. In the 10th dimension, you can watch all possible histories and futures of every universe simultaneously. And finally, in the 11th dimension, which is unique to M theory, we unify 5 different string theories. Being in this dimension would be in complete unity with the source of all creation, embodying ultimate truth and wisdom. Now, each dimension vibrates at its own frequency, and once you're able to match that frequency, Carson's theory is you can access that dimension, or any dimension in fact.
They're stacked so tight on top of each other that they're like a Planck unit distance away from this universe, right? And now, the only way to get into one is to move into a right angle at a different frequency. You have to obtain the subatomic frequency of that dimension. So if there are beings in higher dimensions that have developed the ability to understand and get the actual subatomic frequency number of the third dimension in this universe, they can theoretically walk from their universe or their dimension directly into ours.
Imagine if beings from the fifth dimension could tune into the frequency of our third dimension. They could pop into our world as they please, which Carson suggests might explain paranormal experiences even. What we consider ghosts might just be beings from higher dimensions looking in on our world out of curiosity, nothing scary at all. Of course, it can still feel scary because we know nothing about higher dimensions or the people living there, but even though we can't access these other dimensions, it doesn't mean we are unfamiliar with the concept. Because Carson also says our brains are capable of thinking in 11 dimensions and collapsing those ideas down into 3 dimensions, something that sounds like only a god could achieve. Research from École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne in Switzerland shows that our brains create neural structures with up to 11 dimensions when processing information. This research was called the Blue Brain Project, and his director, Henry Markram, described it as a world that we had never imagined. Our brains have around 86 billion neurons, and to get a better understanding of how this complex machine works, scientists used supercomputers and algebraic topology, which is a branch of math that describes systems with many dimensions. The study's author, Catherine Hess, explained that algebraic topology acts like a telescope and microscope at the same time, revealing hidden structures and clear spaces within the network. Researchers first tested these concepts on virtual brain tissue and then confirmed their findings on real brain tissue from rats. When stimulated, virtual neurons formed a click, each connected in a way that created specific geometric shapes. More neurons added more dimensions, sometimes up to 11. These structures are organized around a high-dimensional hole called a cavity. After processing the information, the click and cavity disappeared. Researcher Ran Levi explained this process as the brain reacting to stimuli by building and then dismantling multidimensional structures, starting with rods, which are 1 dimensions, then planks, which are 2D, cubes, which are 3D, and then more complex shapes up to 11 dimensions. This activity is like a multidimensional sound castle forming and then disintegrating, and Carson explains it like this.
So this chair that we're sitting in right now, a person thought about this chair first before it manifested as solid matter, but they thought about it on the multi-dimensional platform. Higher dimensional thinking. The person who was thinking about creating this chair collapsed it from multi-dimensions into 2 dimensions. How? By drawing it on a piece of paper. Then it went from there probably into a computer nowadays, which is a CAD, computer assisted design, which is still 2D, even though it gives you the illusion of 3D in the computer. Now the data from it gets sent to an engineer who now crafts it into a 3-dimensional object that we can maneuver in XYZ axis in space-time. So this chair that I'm sitting in and you're sitting in started off It was created in multi-dimensions and then collapsed into a three-dimensional structure that we're sitting on right now.
The idea is that before anything exists in the real world, it starts as a concept or thought. This conceptual stage happens in a kind of higher dimensional thinking where the idea isn't limited by physical constraints. Every idea begins in a limitless theoretical space that we later whittle down into something that would actually work in our three-dimensional world. Many times we go beyond what's possible in our imaginations because our brains form complex, multidimensional structures, but in collapsing our ideas down to work in the 3D world, we are limiting our capabilities rather than raising our frequencies. So Carson's theory is, just as neurons form complex multidimensional structures, traveling to other dimensions might involve matching the specific frequency or state of those dimensions. By tuning into the right frequency, similar to how a radio works, we could theoretically access different dimensions or realms almost effortlessly. But the essence of this subject is, these portals to other dimensions are natural, and trying to recreate them will take decades, if not centuries. Science is only just catching up to what kings and higher dimensional beings knew in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia and Tula, but it's taking the long way around to reach the same conclusions. Tapping into ancient texts and taking their stories and instructions seriously might be our best shot at learning how they managed to raise their frequencies and utilize these naturally occurring portals. And even if portal travel remains out of our reach, raising our frequencies to understand the harmony and unity of the 11th dimension might just be enough.